Every commercial has its catchy slogan at the end. Geico's 15 minutes, BMW's the ultimate driving machine, even America being the American dream. Just work hard enough and anyone can succeed, regardless of background, history, or financial situation. I'm here, these all sound too good to be true, and I'm here to tell you that they are. We're here especially today to talk about the American dream. Mia Birdsong, in her TED Talk similar to this one, addresses this by evidencing situations of poor people and how they have to innovate and work extremely hard to even make it by, and yet they remain poor. You see, poor people aren't poor because they've made bad decisions or they're simply lazy. If that were the case, they couldn't even survive in their own conditions. No, poor people are poor because other people are rich. And these rich people have power. And to no one's surprise, these rich and powerful people use that wealth to keep the poor poor and maintain their own wealth. Now, I'd like to take some time to talk about something I've seen in my personal life that relates directly to this topic. A man I watch on YouTube has recently been sued, supposedly for stealing someone else's content, but in reality, he was just using it under fair use law. Despite the fact that he was using it under fair use law and was perfectly innocent, he has still had to undergo a financially strenuous legal process, paying lawyers and court fees. He is not nearly as poor as most Americans. In fact, he makes it by quite well. Despite this, he has barely been able to pay these court fees and has been almost scared off by the person suing him multiple times. This shows that it's no longer a matter of only poor people being subjected to this kind of financial bullying. In reality, it's spread to everybody except for the most privileged CEOs and celebrities. The fact that the internet has become an increasingly viable medium for like-minded people to come together and discuss injustices has become a threat to the government and corporations aiming to maintain their oppression. This has been seen in the example I referenced earlier because Google has done nothing to offer support, and big media outlets are hardly covering the story that represents one of the most precious American values, free speech. Now that I've established how physically difficult the life of the poor person is, let's see how large of a margin we're talking about in terms of the American population. Surely, these poor people represent a small fraction of America. Simply, that is not the case. In fact, according to the article, The State of Poverty in America, approximately 1/3 of U.S. Americans are below twice the poverty line. And the percentage of people in severe poverty has doubled since 1976. Government response to this situation for helping the poor has shown no signs of improving and has been a terrible failure. Money set aside for helping the poor has been swallowed up by big corporations in the name of helping poor people. The big push by government for more jobs and less unemployment rate has come at the cost of reasonable pay rates and health benefits. And people who qualify for need-based aid such as food stamps and other services are simply not receiving them. So how can we fix this? Well, there is no easy solution. Obviously, we need for good, hardworking people to be able to supply their families with food and their other financial needs. But that alone is not enough. We need to put an end to the cycle of poverty and the dynasties of the rich. The only way for this to occur is if efforts are led by community leaders themselves. Mia Birdsong proposes that local community leaders are the only ones who can help local communities overcome their state of poverty. You see, the rich and the government try, but they don't understand the intricacies of the local community like the people who live there do. So in essence, the local people are the ones that need the funding, not the government.
Don Albrecht, a former faculty member in the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism at Texas A&M University, wrote a paper on poverty, inequality, and social justice in non-metropolitan America. In his paper, the data clearly shows the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, as the total household income gap increased for the rich and decreased for the poor between 1967 and 2003. A main reason for the income gap stems directly from a lack of education. Albrecht explains that public schools get their funding from local income taxes, and due to low-income communities, schools in these neighborhoods usually lack the necessary resources to adequately prepare students for college and the real world. Furthermore, due to increased cost of college tuition and a lack of educational preparedness, students in these low-income communities typically do not go to college. This only limits their job opportunities and therefore continues the low-income cycle. The high school that I went to was one of the lower income schools in the county, so I was able to see firsthand the effects that living in a low-income household has on people. Most of the students who came from a lower income family did not put a strong focus on their academics. Most were average or sometimes below average. This stemmed partly from knowing that college was never in their future, as they knew they would never be able to afford it. At our school, you see, we had some classes that were called CTE classes. This stood for Career and Technical Education. These classes included things such as horticulture, carpentry, welding, auto mechanics, and masonry. The students of lower income families, they tended to focus harder on these courses than their other classes, as these CTE courses were more helpful in preparing them for the workforce after high school. Low-income communities are often faced with the unjust availability of adequate health care and food with a nutritional value. Nutritious foods tend to typically cost a bit more than junk food, and therefore inhibit the poor from purchasing it. This leads to more health problems and shorter lives. If a health problem occurs in a low-income community, they are less likely to be able to get treated due to an absence of this health insurance as a result of high costs. On the other hand, wealthy communities, they have no problem affording health insurance. This difference in being able to afford health insurance further divides the two communities, as the wealthy stay wealthy and live longer and become more powerful, while the poor remain sick and unable to receive help. You see, by never being able to break free from the low-income cycle, the rich and the powerful benefit. The wealthy in America, they tend to have more power and political influence than the poor, leaving those in poverty with a constant feeling of less worth. This can lead to an increase in violence and crime in these communities. These crimes, they can cost a lot of money due to damages, court costs, and paying those working in the prison system. These crimes also cause residents of the community to live in fear, which therefore lowers the quality of life in the community. A powerful quote of Bryan Stevenson really highlights the focus of this talk. Wealth, not culpability, shapes outcomes. The meaning behind this quote is quite powerful. What he is saying is that it's not someone's actions or faults that determine their innocence. And instead, a person's innocence is determined by how much money they have. Wealth allows people to buy their way out of many situations, most of the time by simply being able to afford a good lawyer, while the poor are not able to do so. In Stevenson's TED Talk, he discusses a case where his 14-year-old poor black defendant was able to be tried as something that he was not, an adult. This moved for him to request for his defendant to be tried as a privileged 70-year-old white businessman. Now, making such a request seems foolish at first, but when thought about more deeply, this request is not so foolish after all. You see, Bryan Stevenson states that the opposite of poverty is not wealth, but in fact the opposite of poverty is justice. If this is in fact true, then this means that poverty is an injustice, making the poor always at fault and the wealthy always right. It is this kind of thinking that causes a greater divide between the rich and the poor, and more of an unjust society. Thank you.